don't think it's crazy to say this. Dune Part 2 is one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. Now, there's been a lot of great science fiction movies over the years. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Blade Runner, The Matrix, Alien, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, E.T. So many great science fiction movies over the years, and Dune Part 2 deserves to be on that list. Now, I'm not afraid to admit when I am biased. I was super excited for this movie. Y'all know all the way back last summer, I made a short breaking down the trailer for Dune Part 2 when it first came out, and that's the most viewed video on my channel by far. It has almost 200,000 views, and I still get comments and likes on it every single day since last summer. It's crazy how many people like that video, and it's the most popular video on my channel, that short. And if you watched my most anticipated movies for 2024 video, Dune Part 2 was my most anticipated movie for the year. So we're starting off the year pretty strong. I knew this movie was going to be good, but my goodness, did it exceed my expectations. Now, like I said, I'm biased. I grew up reading sci-fi books. I've always been a huge fan of Star Wars, and I became a big fan of Frank Herbert's Dune universe as I got older and became an adult. So I was really excited to see Denis Villeneuve's interpretation of Dune, and the first part was really good in my opinion, but this second part far exceeds the first part. Even though it's two parts of one movie, I feel like the second part is just elevates everything from that first movie. It takes everything to another level. And I think that this is the greatest version of Dune that we could have possibly gotten at this point in time. David Lynch's Dune, will always have a place in Dune fans' hearts. It was wacky, it was fun in a cult classic kind of way, the weirding modules and whatnot.
Russell no longer needs the weirding module.
But this is the best version of Dune that we've had by far. For starters, Denis Villeneuve does a fantastic job realizing the world of Dune with his visual direction alongside the cinematographer Greg Fraser, who worked on other movies like Rogue One, which is one of my favorite recent Star Wars movies, The Batman, which is one of my favorite Batman movies, and The Creator, which is a little science fiction movie that came out last year and went way under the radar. I think that movie is very underrated for what it is. It's a really interesting movie, some interesting concepts and beautiful visuals in that movie, just like here in Dune. Greg Fraser does it once again. He deserves an Oscar for cinematography for Dune Part 2. What he and Denis Villeneuve are able to accomplish here is something special. The shots in this movie are some of the most believable I've ever seen in a science fiction movie. I'm using a lot of my hands like I'm Italian or something. But sometimes you watch these movies and the CGI is a little wonky, like some of the more modern Marvel or Star Wars movies, or it's evident that they're filming on a blue screen or the volume like they do in a lot of the recent Star Wars movies. But here, everything looks real and it looks beautiful. I could watch a cut of this movie that's just the visuals, no dialogue, like just the visuals, and I would be completely entertained and captivated the entire time. The visuals in this movie and the shots that they create are just that good. The cast in this movie is also amazing. Now, it's an expansive cast with some of the most premier actors working today, and a lot of them come back from Dune Part 1 with a few new faces, but none of them outshine the other. They all really fall into the characters they're playing, and they're all very believable. Everyone is great in this movie, but I did want to highlight a few of the performances, starting off with Leia Sado as the Lady Margot Fennering. Oh my God. Y'all, I know I'm known from my short for the guy that simps for Florence Pugh, but I'm telling y'all, I think Leia Sado took her place in my heart. If the Lady Fenring told me to off myself, she wouldn't even have to use the voice. I would be on my knees and gone in an instant. I'd be like Thanos snapped off this world. I would shuffle off this mortal coil with the quickness.
Yeah, that brother's starving.
But for real though, Lea Sado as the Lady Margot Fennering does a fantastic job here. Now, I wasn't expecting her to have a large role, and she doesn't. But in the short time that she is in the movie, she is captivating in the role that she plays, and I would love to see more of her in the future. I really hope she has a more expanded role in the Dune Messiah adaptation that's supposed to be coming, according to Denis Villeneuve. Now, I really wish that the HBO Max show about the Bene Gesserit that's coming out wasn't about the start of the Bene Gesserit, because I would love to see a show, focusing solely on the Lady Margot Fennering's character. I think that she could really drive and be the lead of a very interesting narrative. She just fully encompasses what it means to be a Bene Gesserit, in my opinion. If someone who never read the Dune books or never watched the movie just heard about the Bene Gesserit and said, who are the Bene Gesserit, or what do they do? What are the Bene Gesserit about? I would show them the scene in this movie with the Lady Margot Fennering and Fade Routha. That scene was it was captivating when I watched it. I was grinning from ear to ear at how despicable and sinister and cunning and deceptive she was when she was basically seducing Fade. It was a short scene, but it was the perfect depiction of how cunning and how vile and how 10 steps ahead and truly sinister the Bene Gesserit sisterhood is. I thought she did a fantastic job at portraying what the Bene Gesserit are. She was all about the mission. And she was all about the Missionara Protectiva, about down for the Bene Gesserit. Lady Margot Fennering is down for the cause. And I thought Alea Sado really did a great job at portraying a Bene Gesserit, and I really would like to see more of her in the Dune Messiah adaptation. Speaking of Bene Gesserit, I thought that Rebecca Ferguson as the lady and now Reverend Mother Jessica, Paul's mother, did a fantastic job in this movie. I thought she really elevated her performance from the first movie in this movie, especially after she receives the water of life. Much like Lea Sado, she is down for the Missionara Protectiva. She is down for the Bene Gesserit cause. She is sinister. She is cunning. She's almost evil. Like she's almost one of, I would say she's kind of an antagonist in the movie, at least as far as the plot goes. She's not an antagonist to Paul, but she is an antagonist to the in the greater plot, I would say, because she's really just so she's so sinister, her portrayal. Like there was points where I was like, oh man, she is disturbing. The way that she is, manipulating the Fremen with the Missionara Protectiva, and with, the Bene Gesserit lies and the prophecies that they've instilled in the Fremen. She's really going hard, especially when after she gets the Water of Life and goes to the Southern Tribe. She's really going hard for the Bene Gesserits and the prophecies, trying to get them to believe that Paul is the Muad'Dib, the Lisan al Gaib. And I thought that Rebecca Ferguson really elevated her performance from the first movie. I thought she was okay in the first movie, but she really takes it up a notch in this movie. And I thought she did a great job, especially once she becomes a Reverend Mother. Javier Bardem as Stilgar is another standout performance in this movie, and probably my favorite of all of the cast. I really thought that Javier Bardem did a great job portraying a fanatical believer in the Lisan al Gaib. Anyone that's been a part of religion or any sort of fanatical group knows somebody like Stilgar who just completely believes, the words and the prophecies of the religion that they're in. He plays it so well that at points it's almost comical. But despite it being funny sometimes, he is 100% believable. I don't for a second doubt, the character that he's playing. It's never like a character breaking moment. When he's funny, it's completely believable. Such a great performance by Javier Bardem. He's one of my favorite actors working today. I really think he needs to get more work in more serious roles like this, because he is such a great actor. I love Javier Bardem in everything, and he is great in Dune Part 2 as well. And the last performer I wanted to highlight is Austin Butler as Fade Routha. Lovely Fade.
Lovely fate.
He was menacing, he was terrifying, he was driven, he was powerful. From what we got in the trailers, I thought that he was going to be sort of like a one note, stereotypical, psychotic bad guy, but boy, was I proven wrong. Austin Butler, he really brought gravitas and charisma and nuance to the role of Fade Routha. It's such a different portrayal from Sting in the David Lynch in the David Lynch Dune movie. But it's a really great portrayal of Fade Routha, and I think it's one that is despite it being a little bit different from the books, I thought it really captures the spirit of Fade Routha, especially in this version of in Denny Villeneuve's vision of Dune. And I was actually pretty sad when he dies in the knife fight towards the end of the movie. It had to happen because it's a plot point of the books as well. So you knew it was going to happen. But I was sad when it did because I really liked Austin Butler's portrayal as Fade and would have loved to see him, in the Dune Messiah adaptation. I would have loved to seen what the Benny Gesserit would have done with him still alive because they aren't really too excited that Paul is the Lisan al Gaib because they can't control him like they could have controlled Fade Routha. So I think it would have been interesting if he had made the decision, if Denis Villeneuve had made the decision to keep Fade Routha alive. And maybe you never know, people don't always stay dead. We could see him come back. There is probably a character that died that's going to come back if you don't know the books. So there's a chance that maybe, we could see him come back, although I think it would cheapen the story overall. But I think it would be interesting. Personally, I think it'd be interesting if he did come back, Fade Routha, just to see how the Benny Gesserit would use him. And I also, selfishly, I really liked Austin Butler's portrayal as Fade Routha. So selfishly, I'd like to see him come back. But it was a great performance. Like I said, he was menacing. He brought a lot of gravitas and nuance to the character of Fade Routha that we haven't seen before. And a much better performance than Sting, even though Sting's performance of Fade Routha lives in a special place in the hearts of a lot of OG Dune fans. Speaking of OG Dune fans, it's time to get to the nerd stuff. Now, if you're a fan of the books, you realize that Denis Villeneuve took the liberty to make some pretty big changes from the book to the movie. Now, usually when movies make changes from books, it's for the worse and not for the better. A lot of people will always, when you see a movie that's adapted from a book, they'll say the book is better than the movie because usually they make changes that are worse for movies. But I think that the changes that Denis Villeneuve made from the book to the movie is one of the few exceptions to that rule. I really thought that most of the changes that he made were for the better and served the story that he's telling better, and a couple of them were even improvements on the book, in my opinion. And I think they're changes that Frank Herbert would have appreciated if he were to see the movie today. For one, in the book, the events take place over the course of 3 years, but or almost 3 years. In the book, Aaliyah or Alia, I don't know how you pronounce it. Some people say Alia, I say Aaliyah. I think they said Aaliyah in the Dune, in the David Lynch version of the movie. So I say Aaliyah, but Aaliyah's a toddler in the book. But in the movie, the Lady Jessica is pregnant with Aaliyah at the beginning, and we see, and she starts off at the beginning of her pregnancy, at the beginning of the movie, and then as the movie progresses, she's towards the end of her pregnancy, towards the end of the movie, and we only see Aaliyah, who's played by Anya Taylor-Joy. We only see her in some visions as Anya Taylor-Joy, and then also as a CGI fetus, which was, I thought, made for some really interesting scenes with the fetus speaking to the Lady Jessica and also to Paul, because she became an abomination when Lady Jessica consumed the waters of life. She became that abomination, like in the books. They call her an abomination because she has these powers from having the water. Well, it's implied that that happened in the books, but or at least from what I recall. But in the movie, they actually show the water of life kind of consuming Aaliyah in the womb as well. So we get to see that visual that I don't believe we saw in the book, but was implied through the text. But yeah, so I thought it was really interesting. And Aaliyah, but although Aaliyah was speaking to Paul, we did hear her speaking to Paul before she got the water of life. So I don't know how that works. I guess maybe she just got even more powerful, or she just became that abomination. I don't know. I guess we'll see in Dune Messiah when Aaliyah is finally realized as a person. But yeah, so that was one of the changes that took place. That kind of timeline change of making it from in the book it's almost 3 years, but in the movie it's basically the spans the term of a pregnancy, so around 9 months, unless the lady Jessica is having some sort of prolonged pregnancy, but they don't ever say that or make any mention of that. So we are, from what we get from the movie, we're to assume that this happens within the span of at least 9 months, the whole movie. So I thought that was an interesting choice, but I did think that for the story that Denis Villeneuve is telling, I thought it was for the better. Now, alongside the timeline change came some changes to Chani's character as well, which I actually thought were logical for this version of the character and made her, much more interesting and nuanced than she is in the books. She's not as nuanced in the books as she is here in the movies. For one, in the first book, she has a child with Paul named Leto II, who is killed and attacked by the Sardaukar. Now, this is kind of confusing because in Dune Messiah, she has twins, and the male twin they also name Leto II Atreides. So it's kind of confusing because the second Leto II has a much larger role in the future books, or a much larger role in the future books. But that first Leto II didn't really live that long because he was killed as a baby in an attack by the Sardaukar in the first Dune book. So that's a change. We don't ever see that happen in the movie. But also in the movie, Chani, like I said, Chani, she doesn't have as much nuance or as much agency as a character in the book as she does in the movie. I kind of prefer Zendaya's version of Chani to the book Chani, to be honest, because of that nuance to her character. And I thought that the changes that Denis Villeneuve made to the character served the character better overall. And I've also seen a lot of people online kind of complaining that about how Chani walked out on Paul towards the end when he offers his hand, when he offers his hand in marriage to Princess Irulan, to make her his wife in that sort of political engagement. But I think it's consistent with the way that Shawnee's character is portrayed in the movie. I think if that hadn't happened, it would have felt weird because that's the way that Shawnee has been. She feels betrayed by Paul because Paul said he was always going to love her and he wasn't going to change. Then he takes the water of life, becomes the Lisa Nagaib, and he kind of goes crazy in her eyes and becomes this big, powerful messiah. And then he's taking Princess Irulan's hand for this political marriage, and she feels betrayed. So she kind of walks out on him. So I have seen people online, hardcore Dune fans complaining about that because in the books, obviously, she is she if you're not familiar with the books, he does take Princess Irulan's hand in marriage for a political marriage in the books, but he doesn't love Princess Irulan. Chani stays with him as kind of his concubine, so he's married to Princess Irulan for the political marriage, but he really loves Chani, and he never shows Princess Irulan any love or affection. And if you're in, a Dune fan, a Dune book fan, it's kind of a meme about how he loves Chani and shows her all the affection and doesn't really care for Princess Irulan. But I think that, like I said, I thought this was consistent with Chani's character, and in the movie, Paul does say that that she's gonna come around, that he's seen it in a vision. So she's gonna come back, Johnny, and I think it's gonna be interesting to see, the storyline of how they make that plot of how Chani comes back to Paul after he becomes, this holy war leader and basically the worst person in the universe, causing the death of billions and the starvation of millions, like he saw in his visions, and we see in the books. It's going to be interesting to see how she comes back to him. That's going to be an interesting plot point and an interesting arc for her character. So I thought that all the changes to Chani, even though some hardcore Dune book fans didn't like them, personally, I thought they fit the character well within this version of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Another great change from the books to the movie was the distinction between the northern and southern Fremen. In the book, there isn't as prominent as a divide between the northern and the southern Fremen, at least in their beliefs, as there is in the movie. But I really enjoyed this change in the movie. The northern Fremen are less in number, and they're more skeptical of the prophecies. They're less fanatical, as we see through the eyes of Chani and her friend, who are northern Fremen, while the southern Fremen are more fanatical, they're more religious, they're more easily swayed by the prophecies of the Bene Gesserit about the Lisan al Gaib. Like I mentioned with the portrayal of Stilgar, he is just ready to jump on everything that Paul does. He thinks when Paul denies that he's the Lisan al Gaib, he says it's because he's so humble. So the Southern Fremen are more, they lean more toward the religious prophecies, which I also think is an interesting juxtaposition to, if you're familiar with the Bible Belt. Obviously, the Bible Belt is in the South, and it's a region of the South that is known to be filled with people that are super hardcore Christians. So, and some might say fanatical. I grew up Pentecostal, so I am familiar with the Bible Belt, and so I thought it was interesting, kind of parallel to real life, about how maybe the North might be a bit more not atheistic, but a bit more skeptical to religion, whereas the South, where you might find the Bible Belt, is a bit more religious. I thought that was an interesting parallel to real life. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think obviously that was intentional, or if it wasn't, it's a really good coincidence. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting change from the book to the movie. I thought it provided some conflict among the Fremen, which led to some interesting scenes and a little bit more nuance for the characters of Stilgar and Chani, who again could use a little bit more nuance from their characters in the books. Now, there were a few things that were left out of the movie that I was hoping to see in the movie. One of those was the Guild Navigators. They're very interesting characters, and we never got to see them. I thought that they would make for some really cool visuals, but I think that based on the ending of the movie, as well as the tease that we're getting for Dune Messiah, I think that we'll probably see the Guild Navigators. We should definitely see them. The Space Guild and the Guild Navigators in Dune Messiah, but we didn't get any mention of the Guild or the Guild Navigators or anything about that in this book or in this part of Dune. But I think in the Dune Messiah adaptation, we'll definitely see them. And the cinematographer and Denis Villeneuve will get to flex their muscles once again when we see the giant ships. We did see one of the ships in Dune Part 1, but we don't get to see inside of the ship. It was that giant, huge ship. That was one of the guild ships, but we don't get to see the inside of it. And as you know, because of the Butlerian Jihad, which happened in the Dune books, if you're not familiar with the books, they don't, in the Dune universe, they don't use computers. That's why Thurfier in the first movie, the guy whose eyes flipped when they told him to do calculations, they have people that take spice, that are able to do some of them do the calculations, and then the guild navigators, they take spice, and that's how they navigate through the planets and the asteroid belts without computers. It's basically a bunch of people who are able to see into the future like Paul is, and they use that to navigate through space. So it's a really interesting concept that we didn't get to see in this part, but hopefully Denis Villeneuve brings that to us in the Dune Messiah adaptation. Another thing that we didn't see or hear, I guess, in this was mentions of the Lanzarad. The Lanzarad is basically the coalition of all the houses, which at the end of the movie they do say that the great houses are coming down to because they don't like how Paul's dealing with the Emperor. They're basically coming to attack, and that's when Paul says that he's gonna blow all the spice up, and the Emperor says you're bluffing, but it didn't seem like he was, and so they kind of back off. And then later they go to attack them, and Paul says it's going to be a holy war. And we get the teases of that holy war that killed billions and billions of people amongst the galaxy in the books, which I'm really interested to see how Denis Villeneuve portrays that in the Dune Messiah adaptation. I think that's going to be really great. But they don't mention the Lanzarad by name. They do mention the houses, though, the great houses. So maybe that's just some terminology, that extra terminology he didn't want to add to make it more confusing than it already is for people who aren't familiar with the books. It's kind of keeping the nerd talk down to a minimum. So that's just a little thing that was for people that are fans of the books. I'm sure that they'll use that word in Dune Messiah, and even if they don't really have to. It's just a term that is used in the books to refer to the houses. And another thing that happened in the book is that the Baron is actually killed by Aaliyah in the book, but obviously that couldn't happen because of the timeline change that I mentioned earlier. Aaliyah is still a fetus in the movie. In the book, though, she's a toddler, and she kills the Baron. But in the movie, Paul kills the Baron, which I thought is better for this adaptation of the movie or of the book from the movie, or from of the movie from the book, because it gives a little bit more closure and catharsis to Paul's character for people. As far as the plot in the movies has been going, he gets to get a little bit of vengeance for his father. So that wasn't a change that I was bothered by. It's just one that I wanted to note that's different from the books. And another thing that is a change that's not so much a change as much as it is a nitpick. Thought that Christopher Walken as the Emperor did a decent job, but he's not as opulent and as extravagant uh, in the movie as he is in the books. The Emperor is like the greatest um, person in the entire universe. He basically controls the Dune universe, and he's very opulent and very extravagant. And they don't really show that as much in the movie as they do in the book. But that's not that's big of a problem. I thought that Christopher Walken did okay. He wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the greatest portrayal I think that we could have got, but it was good enough for the movie. He doesn't have as big of a role in the movie, as other characters. So it's just a little nitpick, not so much a complaint by me. Just a little thing that I thought I would mention. So that's all my thoughts on Dune Part 2. Overall, this is a great movie. I would give Dune Part 2 a 9 out of 10. Like I said earlier, it's worthy to be in the conversation among the greatest sci-fi movies of all time. I will be seeing this at least two more times this week, and in a theater. And when the Blu-ray Steelbook comes out with both parts, I'll be buying that day one for sure. But let me know your thoughts about Dune Part 2 down in the comments below. Make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more comic book and pop culture talk. And I will see y'all another day.